August in Phoenix was brutal, and running deliveries in this heat wasn't exactly my dream job. But rent doesn't pay itself, and desert grounds kept me afloat between my other gigs. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching. The coffee was already lukewarm by the time I reached the 40th floor, sweat beading on my forehead despite the aggressive air conditioning in Sterling Tower. The elevator opened directly into an executive suite that screamed money. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, and a view that made the whole city look like a toy set. I stood there holding a tray of iced drinks, feeling completely out of place in my wrinkled uniform. "You made it!" The voice came from behind a massive desk where a woman sat reviewing documents. She looked up, and I forgot how to breathe for a second. Dark hair pulled into a sleek bun, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in one glance. Victoria Sterling. I'd seen her face on business magazines, but photographs didn't capture the way she commanded a room just by existing in it. "3 cold brews," I managed, walking forward with the tray. "Extra shot in all of them." She stood and approached me, moving with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. "I only ordered one," she said, taking the tray from my hands. "But I thought you might be thirsty. You look like you've been walking through hell." "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake." "No mistake." She set the tray down and handed me one of the drinks. "I've seen you here before. Asked my assistant about you. Anna, right? From Desert Grounds?" The fact that she knew my name sent a strange flutter through my chest. Rich people didn't usually notice delivery drivers, much less remember their names or care enough to ask questions. I was part of the invisible workforce that kept their world running smoothly while remaining completely beneath their radar. What could someone like Victoria Sterling possibly find interesting about me? I delivered coffee, waited tables, and lived paycheck to paycheck. I wasn't glamorous or sophisticated or any of the things that usually attracted successful people. "Yeah, that's me. Just doing part-time deliveries." "Well, Anna from Desert Grounds, would you like to sit for a minute? Or do you need to rush back into that furnace outside?" Every practical instinct told me to politely decline and leave, but something in her tone, casual yet interested, made me hesitate. There was also the matter of the ice-cold coffee in my hand, and the promise of a few more minutes in blessed air conditioning. "I guess I could stay for a few minutes." She gestured toward the seating area by the windows. I perched on the edge of a leather chair that probably cost more than my car, while she settled across from me with an ease that spoke of endless boardroom meetings and power lunches. "So what's the real story?" she asked, taking a sip of her coffee. "Coffee delivery can't be your end game." "Just trying to keep my head above water," I said honestly. "Working a couple different jobs, saving up for, I don't know yet, something better." She nodded, studying my face with an intensity that made me self-conscious. "I respect that. Too many people expect success to be handed to them. What are the other jobs?" "Waitressing at a diner downtown, some freelance graphic design when I can get it." I found myself being more open than I'd intended. Trying to save enough to go back to school, maybe. "For what?" "Art therapy. Working with kids who've been through trauma." I shrugged, suddenly feeling exposed. "Sounds naive, probably." "It sounds necessary." Her voice was serious, and when I looked up, her expression had softened. "The world needs people who care about healing, not just profit." We talked for nearly 40 minutes about nothing consequential. The heat, the city, the absurd traffic that made deliveries a nightmare. But underneath the small talk was something else, an electricity I couldn't name. She asked thoughtful questions, actually listened to my answers, and seemed genuinely curious about my life in a way that felt both flattering and surreal. When I finally stood to leave, realizing I'd been gone far longer than any reasonable delivery should take, she walked me to the elevator. "I'd like to see you again," she said simply. "Not for coffee delivery." The directness caught me off guard. "I don't think we exactly run in the same circles." "Then let's create our own circle." The elevator doors opened, and she stepped closer. I caught a hint of her perfume, something expensive and subtle. "Dinner tomorrow? I'll send a car." Before I could overthink it, before the practical voice in my head could list all the reasons this was a terrible idea, I heard myself saying yes. The next evening, I stood in my tiny closet trying to find something appropriate for wherever Victoria Sterling ate dinner. My wardrobe consisted mainly of work uniforms and casual clothes suitable for Phoenix heat. Eventually, I settled on a simple black dress I'd worn to exactly 2 job interviews and hoped for the best. The car that picked me up was sleek and quiet, the kind of vehicle that whispered rather than announced. I expected to be driven to some exclusive restaurant with prices that would make me dizzy, the kind of place where I'd need to pretend I knew what half the items on the menu meant. Instead, we ended up at a small place tucked into a strip mall, the kind of authentic Mexican food that locals guarded jealously from tourists. Victoria was already there, sitting in a corner booth wearing jeans and a casual top that somehow still looked expensive. "Not what you expected?" she asked as I slid into the seat across from her. "Honestly, no." "Good. I get tired of performing all the time." She flagged down the server and ordered in fluent Spanish, then turned back to me. "The woman everyone sees in the papers. That's my work uniform. This is closer to who I actually am." The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the polished executive from yesterday, replaced by someone more relaxed, more real. She'd let her hair down, literally and figuratively, and the effect was stunning. But sitting across from her in this casual setting only made the gulf between us feel wider. I kept waiting for the moment when she'd realize she was wasting her time with someone who couldn't even afford to split the bill. Over plates of street tacos and surprisingly strong margaritas, she told me about growing up in a family that measured worth in net profit, about being groomed from childhood to take over the family business, about the loneliness of always being seen as a bank account with legs. "I built my company from a single property investment that nearly bankrupted me," she said, picking at the label on her beer bottle. "My father thought I was crazy investing in what was basically desert wasteland at the time, but I could see what Phoenix was becoming. I found myself sharing stories I rarely told anyone, about my mom working double shifts to keep us housed after my dad left, about dreams I'd pushed aside because they seemed too big for someone like me, about the crushing weight of student loans that had forced me to drop out of college, just 12 credits short of graduating. "What stopped you from finishing?" she asked. "Mom got sick. Cancer." I took a long sip of my margarita, feeling the tequila burn slightly. Had to choose between my degree and keeping her apartment while she went through treatment. It wasn't really a choice. "Is she okay now?" "She's in remission, stubborn as ever and back to working too much." I smiled, though the memory of that year still ached. "But the debt from that time, it's taking a while to dig out from under it." Victoria reached across the table and touched my hand, her fingers warm against mine. "That's not giving up on your dreams. That's love." Something shifted between us during that conversation. The attraction I'd felt in her office deepened into something more complex. Recognition, maybe, like we were both tired of pretending to be versions of ourselves that fit other people's expectations. When the server brought the check, Victoria handled it smoothly, waving away my attempt to contribute. "This was my invitation," she said. Besides, I have a feeling you'll get plenty of chances to buy me dinner in the future. The assumption in that statement should have felt presumptuous. Instead, it sent a warm flutter through my chest. Are you always this confident? I asked as we walked to her car. Only when I want something badly enough. She stopped walking and turned to face me. And I want to know you, Anna. All of you. Not just the polite version you show customers. We drove to a house in the desert foothills, 20 minutes from the city, but feeling like another world entirely. Simple adobe walls, huge windows framing the mountains, furniture that looked comfortable rather than impressive. This is where I come to remember who I am, she said, leading me through rooms filled with books and paintings and the kind of personal touches that were absent from her corporate spaces. No staff, no meetings, no one who wants anything from me except maybe conversation. The house felt lived in a way her office didn't. There were coffee rings on the wooden tables, dog-eared paperbacks stacked on every surface, and a kitchen that showed signs of actual cooking rather than just photo shoots. We ended up on her back patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. The desert stretched out before us, dotted with saguaro cacti standing like ancient sentinels. As the temperature finally began to drop with the disappearing sun, she brought out a bottle of wine and we settled into comfortable chairs. I have a confession, she said, pouring wine into 2 glasses. I didn't just notice you because you deliver coffee. No? You were reading during your break one day. I could see you from my window, sitting on that bench outside the building. You were completely absorbed, totally oblivious to everything around you. She handed me a glass. I was curious what could capture someone's attention so completely in 100-degree heat. I laughed. Probably something embarrassing. I read a lot of romance novels. Nothing embarrassing about that. Romance novels understand something most people don't, that love is work. It requires choice, commitment, the willingness to fight for something precious. The conversation flowed easily now, barriers dropping with each shared confidence. She told me about the ex who'd betrayed her trust so completely, she'd sworn off anything real, choosing instead a series of brief, surface-level relationships that couldn't hurt her. I told her about learning to expect disappointment, about keeping my heart carefully guarded after too many people had proven that love was conditional. Maybe we're both ready to try something different, she said, as the stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Maybe we are. When she finally kissed me, it was soft and questioning, nothing like the confident businesswoman from her office. This was vulnerable, uncertain, real. I kissed her back, tasting wine and possibility, feeling something crack open in my chest that I'd kept locked away for years. Part of me still couldn't believe this was happening, that Victoria Sterling, who could have anyone, was choosing me. I'd never seen myself as someone worth choosing, not by someone like her. We moved inside as the desert air finally began to cool. Her bedroom was simple and warm, nothing like the stark minimalism of her office. Books covered every surface, and the bed was unmade in a way that suggested she actually slept there rather than just posed for magazine spreads. We spent the night talking and touching and discovering each other in the careful way of people who've both been hurt before. She traced the scar on my shoulder from a childhood accident, and I kissed the worry lines at the corners of her eyes. We made love slowly, tenderly, like we had all the time in the world. I haven't felt this safe with someone in years, she whispered against my shoulder. As dawn crept through the windows, neither have I. For 3 perfect days, we existed in a bubble. No phones, no obligations, just us and the desert quiet. We cooked together, badly but enthusiastically. We read books aloud on the patio, swam in her pool as the sun reached its brutal midday peak, and talked about everything and nothing until the early hours of morning. In those moments, I almost forgot about the impossibility of it all. I almost believed I deserved this kind of happiness, this kind of love. I'd spent so long thinking I wasn't enough, not smart enough, not successful enough, not polished enough, that accepting Victoria's affection felt like learning a new language. But reality has a way of intruding. On the fourth day, Victoria's phone started ringing incessantly. Her assistant, her board of directors, journalists who'd noticed her absence from a high-profile real estate summit. "They'll tear us apart if they find out," she said, scrolling through increasingly frantic messages from her team. The press loves a story about powerful women and their distractions. They'll paint you as a gold digger, me as a fool. "So what do we do?" She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the internal battle playing out across her face. The successful businesswoman who'd learned to protect herself at all costs, warring with the woman who'd just spent 3 days being happier than she'd been in years. "We decide if this is worth fighting for," she said finally. The answer for both of us was yes. We returned to the city, knowing the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be judgment, speculation, people who'd try to reduce what we had to a simple narrative about money and power. Victoria's publicist had a minor breakdown when she announced her intention to go public with our relationship. My friends warned me about getting involved with someone so far out of my league. But there would also be mornings waking up next to someone who saw the real you. Evenings spent planning a future that belonged to both of us. Quiet moments stolen between meetings and deliveries. Text messages that made ordinary days feel magical. 3 months later, I quit my delivery job to focus on my other work and my studies. Victoria had quietly arranged for me to meet with an admissions counselor at ASU, who informed me that a scholarship had become available for students pursuing art therapy degrees. Victoria never admitted to any involvement, but her innocent expression fooled no one. "Consider it an investment in the community," she said when I confronted her. "The city needs more people like you." 6 months after that first coffee delivery, I started my graduate program. The press had eventually moved on to other stories, though we still occasionally found ourselves the subject of speculation. The people who mattered learned to accept that sometimes love doesn't follow the rules society writes. Victoria began incorporating community mental health initiatives into her development projects, hiring art therapists for the community centers she built. I started a pilot program working with kids in the foster system, funded by a grant from Sterling Industries. "You've changed me," she told me one evening as we sat on her patio, watching another spectacular desert sunset. "Made me remember why I wanted to build things in the first place, not just to make money, but to make the world a little better." "You changed me too," I replied, leaning against her shoulder. "Made me believe my dreams were worth fighting for." When people ask me now what I thought that first day in her office, I tell them the truth. I thought she was completely out of my league. I had no idea she was exactly what I'd been looking for my whole life. Some stories begin with grand gestures and dramatic declarations. Ours began with lukewarm coffee and a woman brave enough to admit she was lonely. And that, it turns out, was exactly the beginning we needed. Sometimes the richest woman in the city and the girl who delivered her coffee discover that the most valuable things in life can't be bought. They can only be built, one honest moment at a time. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those moments stretch into a lifetime of choosing each other again and again, despite what the world thinks it knows about love.